This is a big ask, right? To present them the opportunity to invest with me on a deal. And so my first time on the phone, I was so nervous. Like I was like shaking the entire time. And then it was a call like this. And I like hung up the phone because I was just too nervous. And then I called them back pretending like the call dropped or something, even though it was obvious that it didn't. And I actually just hung up. And just needless to say, that person did not invest with me. She never messaged me back. She was tough, but that was great. That was what I needed.
All right, hello everyone. Welcome back to the channel. This is the Akimbo Show, and I'm so excited about our guest on today's show. We have a very remarkable young man who is doing great things, not only in the military but also in the real estate world. His name is Jabbar Adeshada. Did I pronounce that right?
Adesada. Everyone wants to say Adeshada. It's Adesada.
Adesada. His name is Jabbar Adesada. Jabbar, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. It's a great honor.
So Jabbar he has Nigerian roots. So can you talk us through a little bit about your Nigerian roots and some ideas about your childhood and upbringing?
Yeah. So first of all, you said I'm Nigerian American. So I grew up in a very Nigerian household. My parents both came here from Nigeria when they were a little bit older, probably around my age. And I've never been to Nigeria.
You have never been to Nigeria?
Sadly, yeah, I've never been able to go.
Wow.
So I've definitely get the Nigerian culture a lot. Growing up, my parents would tell me, "You're not an American boy, you're a Nigerian boy," like all the time. Like grandparents.
And that's usually when they want to discipline you.
Yeah, yep. Yeah, exactly. So I grew up eating all Nigerian food, eba, pounded yam, egusi, all that stuff.
Nice.
So that, and basically, education, as you know, as everyone who's Nigerian knows, is like a big emphasis in the household. So I was kind of like an outlier. I wasn't really that much into school. I didn't really like it because it wasn't very challenging for me, for lack of a better word. I just felt kind of stagnant being there. So that kind of, I guess, was a hint of the entrepreneurial journey. And so my parents were divorced when I was 3 years old. So I lived with my mom. My mom, when I was 15 years old, had to be taken away from my parents to live with my dad, or for my mom to live with my dad because she was abusing me. And that was probably like the best thing that ever happened to me, right? Because when I moved with my father, that's when I kind of got to experience a whole new way of life. So I was living in Maryland before, that's where I was born and stuff, and that's where I grew up. Then when I moved to Texas with my father, and I mean, it was great. I mean, it wasn't great like at the time because he was really hard on me and tough on me. But looking back on it, he kind of would put things in my head that I had no idea would resonate with me. Like we would drive around and he would say, imagine if you bought like all these different franchises and you could like have these different investments here, or if you just studied stocks, like if you study stocks, you might be able to one day just be a full-time stock trader or something like that. Even though he didn't do any investing himself, he would always plant those thoughts in my brain. But at the time, I was really into basketball. That was my thing. So 24/7. And I'll actually tell this story because it's a good one. So when I was actually in Maryland, I tried out for the basketball team. I was cut for my freshman year. I was cut from JV. My sophomore year, I tried out for the basketball team again. I was cut again my sophomore year. When I moved to Texas, I tried out for the basketball team again, and I made the basketball team. And I rode the bench the entire year. I never touched the floor at all. And I was working hard, right? I was waking up at 5 a.m., going to the gym from 5:30 to 8 a.m., then go to school. I would do a little bit of exercise. 12 to 1, I'd do more shooting drills. Then after school, from 3 to 6, I'd work out every single day. And I wasn't ever good enough to get the success to play basketball for a team. And that really taught me that hard work does not guarantee success, right? You have to be working on the right things in order for you to be successful, because it doesn't, you see a lot of people who work hard, people who work at McDonald's. I'm sure there's single mothers who are working hard and grinding, and that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be successful. You have to be practicing the right type of work. And then there's a little bit of luck that goes into there, but it doesn't just, you can't just work hard and expect greater results. It's just part of the formula. So I'm in Texas, not paying attention to a thing my dad's saying because I want to be an NBA basketball player. And then one day my dad calls me to his room and he gets a knife and he pops both of my basketballs. And he was like, "That's it. You're not playing ever again. You're done." And then he handed me Rich Dad Poor Dad. And the reason why he handed me Rich Dad Poor Dad is because our pastor in our Nigerian church had given all the kids in church an assignment to read the book and write a report on it. And I didn't do it because that had nothing to do with basketball. Wow. So after he popped the basketballs, I was depressed, I was sad, but I read the book and wrote an essay on it and I ate it up. It was probably like the best book I've ever read in my life at that point. Read it from cover to cover, wrote the book report on it. And that's kind of when like nothing happened, right? I read the book, did everything like that, but I didn't really do anything with it because I wasn't making any money. So fast forward a little bit, then I'm not able to play basketball. So now I'm like, okay, well, what does every like African kid do when they're not in sports? So naturally, you're a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer, or a disappointment. So since I couldn't be a disappointment anymore, I was like, I think I'm gonna try being a doctor.
Okay.
So I made this decision. I'm like, all right, I'm gonna go to med school and be a surgeon and just do the typical, become a doctor, make your family proud type of thing. So I turned it around. I started paying attention in school, went from like a C, D student to an all A student for my last 2 years of high school. And then, you get to your senior year and that's when you have to decide, what are you doing with your life next? So I knew I wanted to be a doctor, but then I also saw that student loans were very real and doctors are in a lot of debt when they come out of med school. So I was like, I don't really feel that much debt. And at this time, I'm still a little bit lazy, right? I'm not doing all the scholarships that I should be doing. So that's when the Man in Dress Blues came to my high school cafeteria. And he was like, "Hey, like, you've ever thought about the military?" I was like, "No, but I'm interested to hear what you have to say." And he got me. He sold me right there. I told him what I wanted to do with medicine. He's like, "Yeah, we can do that for you in the Marine Corps," quotation marks. We can help you right out. You can be a doctor with us. And so I signed my life away. And after high school, I shipped off to boot camp. And so I guess that's like the upbringing until that moment. So from start to until I joined the military.
What was your dad's reaction when you told him you were joining the military, and your mom's reaction as well?
So my mom, she was not really happy about it at all, actually. And when I say my mom now, I mean my dad's wife. So Americans would say your stepmom, but I actually consider her my mother because she treated me more like a mother than my biological mother ever did.
Right.
And so, she was not very happy about it. My dad was like, "Yes, this will give you the discipline you need." Because my dad has this story where he wanted to join the military, but they told him he didn't have his papers at the time. So they're like, "If you join, they'll deport you." Which, like, you and I both know is not true. Him joining would have gotten him closer to his citizenship. Yeah. So he's seen like other people, I guess, go through it and be successful. And he kind of was like, "Yeah, I think that's a good idea." And then he probably mentioned it one time and he was like, "I told you about it this one time. You're always supposed to be right." So he's like, "I told you so."
Yeah.
And then he convinced my mom to allow me to sign the paper. And then they had to sign it with me because I was 17 to join.
I did not realize the amount of misinformation surrounding, military life until I also decided to join the military. When I decided to join, I didn't need like parental consent when I decided to join. But there were folks that, scared my mom that oh, your son has decided to join the military. He's going to be shipped off to this place. You're never going to see him again. He's going to be tortured. He's going to be maltreated. He might break his leg. He might, so there's all these, and they will send him abroad and he might die in a war. So there's a lot of misinformation and misconception around military life. And I don't know if a lot is being done to address some of these misconceptions.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you, because at least when I joined, that's when like hazing and all those, and bullying and all those different things, like they're really harping down on that, because they had just gotten highlighted for it on national television, because there was like a whole hazing incident that made the news, and obviously that's not good with military, so they were really cracking down on it. But yeah, I agree with you. I mean, military life is not easy, but there's a lot of benefits to it. Just personal growth wise, you deal with adversity a lot. You're not as sensitive. There's a type of way that we think, and it helps with just execution, right? We are more disciplined, grounded typically. And there's benefits to it, like education. I have 8 years of education that I can go and get 8 years of education for free because of the military. Access to the VA loan, which we're going to talk about, how I bought my first property with the VA loan when I was 19. Those are things that a lot of other people don't have because they're not military. So there's definitely pros and cons.
Yeah. So let's dig in a little bit more on your journey with money. So your pastor gave you Rich Dad Poor Dad. You read it. You had to write a book report. And in your story, I see that there were a lot of people who are sowing seeds along your path. Your dad was always, those off-handed comments about, oh, what if you had the opportunity to buy that franchise or buy a couple of franchises or invest in a startup or write a code to develop an app. So those were seeds that were being sown along your path. And then your pastor gave you that book, Rich Dad Poor Dad, and compelled you almost to write a report on it. What are some other, how did your journey with money evolve from there? And your mindset and your thinking about money?
Yeah, so I would say I have this memory, or not this memory, but when I was in boot camp, after reading Rich Dad Poor Dad, I got in trouble one time because I was writing out my budget, like on a piece of paper, and I think I had like $200 or $300 just dedicated towards investing. I knew really, because Rich Dad Poor Dad just gives you like broad concepts, like you should invest, like assets over liabilities and things like that. So I knew I needed to be saving money and investing it. But that was the only framework I had. And then, so I get out of boot camp, and I'm 18 at the time. I turned 18 in boot camp, and I graduate, and I had $2,500. And that was the most money I've ever had in my life. I thought I was loaded. I was like bawling. I came back from boot camp. I remember I gave my parents $1,000.
Wow.
I gave that was so, like, I'm down like what, almost half.
That's so generous of you.
I know. And then I took all my friends out to dinner, like a steak restaurant. I spent money on clothes, on shoes, I got a new phone. I got all these things that I didn't need. And then I think I had like $400 after. So typical 18-year-old kid. Like, I just read Rich Dad Poor Dad, but spent all my money. So then you go from boot camp, I go to combat training. And when I was in combat training, I wasn't able to go home for Thanksgiving because we were in training. This was in Oceanside, California. So the Marine Corps had this program where basically a family was able to adopt you for the holidays. So this nice family in Orange County, California, best thing that ever happened to me. They adopted me for the holidays, me and a buddy. And then I just saw how they were living, and I had never seen it before. I mean, like, these people, the guy's name is Phil. I mean, when I tell you, they're just such happy people. Like, they just live for enjoyment. Phil's the type to come home one day and say to one of his children, hey, you want to go to Paris? Like, I see you've been looking at it. And they'll go that same weekend. or
Wow.
they'll go like skydiving in the morning and scuba diving in the afternoon. Like
Wow.
they've traveled the world. I mean, and they just focus on just happiness. I mean, you just the joy that I saw with them was just so powerful. I was like, man, what does he do? So you get to talking, and then I find out he's into stocks. Obviously, he's a multi-millionaire, and he invests in stocks pretty heavily. And he was telling me about. He gave me some books. He gave me two. It was Automatic Millionaire by David Bach, and then it was I Will Teach You to Be Rich by Ramit Sethi. So I read those two books. Right. Oh, you have them? Yep, that book is amazing.
Yeah, and I have another David Bach book here. This
nice.
What's it called? Start Late, Finish Rich.
So reading those two books and now seeing like the results of those two books, because it's one thing to read it, but then it's another thing to like see it, like see how like the results of following the principles in that book. And I was just hooked. So I read those books cover to cover while in training, and then now I turn from this guy who's just spending money to like this cheap like Mr. Krabs, like no one likes me because I won't spend a penny. And I'm
making a coffee at home.
Oh, I was even drinking coffee. I was eating at the chow hall like every day. No, not at all touching any money. Like I probably, and I say this, like 1 month I probably spent way less, like less than $50.
Wow.
April of 2020. This is 2020. April 2020. I think I spent like $30 or something like that. It was I was cheap because I was investing it. I didn't even save money anymore. I was like, it literally makes no sense for me to save money. I'm young. I'll delay the instant gratification. I had like $1,500 for emergencies. Everything else was getting invested. So I was just investing into the markets. No idea what I was doing, but I would talk to Phil from time to time, and he would give me some tips and advice. And I would dump everything in there. And so then I hope people know this is probably like a big point in history. March of 2020, COVID, I mean, the pandemic stock market just dropped. Yeah. And it was like one of the greatest drops in stock market history. So like I see that and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is on sale. So I pour all my money in. I pour everything that I have in there. I mean, I'm talking to Marines like, hey, if you give me your paycheck and let me put into the market, I will give you 2 of my paychecks at a later time. Like, please. Like I was thinking about taking a loan out to just invest because everything I had seen, I was like, Amazon is not fundamentally different because of a coronavirus. Apple's not fundamentally different because of a coronavirus. Like all these different companies are not any different just because of corona. Like they're going to come back. Like they're not worth 40% less just because. And this was when, you see the headlines, people are liquidating their retirements and 401ks. And I'm like, man, this is heaven. I'm a kid in a candy store. Yeah. So then I go through this period.
And you only had that disposition and that understanding because of the knowledge that you had come in contact with over time.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. That's exactly right. But now I'm acting on it.
Right.
So
the results how much did you end up putting in the market? How much were you able to gather and put in the market?
See, I have no clue. I was making $1,500 a month, $1,400 to $1,500 a month at the time. And so this went on from, I would say, January of 2020 to July of 2020. So maybe $7,000, maybe 7 or 8. But in July of 2020, right? So let's say I put 7 and I was also side hustling. So I'd write essays for money. I would take people's duties and in exchange for money and things like that, because I wanted to invest more. So maybe $7,000 or $8,000. And so the military, from I guess my entire time being in July of 2020, had paid me $13,000 or $14,000, maybe even $15,000, and I had double that in my investment account in July of 2020. So then that solidified like the power of investing for me. I was like, this works, because I've literally, like, my investments have always been greater than all the money I've ever made actively, which is, I guess, sad in the sense where it shows I don't make a lot of money, but good in the sense that my investments are really paying off.
Right.
So then, at that point, I started doing all these compound interest calculators, and trying to figure out like, when will I be a millionaire? At what point will I have all this, like, the money to be financially free? And I was like, man, it's gonna take me years. It's gonna probably take me I'm gonna be like 30 something years old. And granted, that's young, right, to be a millionaire 30 something years old. But I was like, then you start doing, like, in Ramit Sethi's book, it talks about the FIRE movement, the 4% rule. And I'm like, man, that's only $1 million is only 40 grand a year that I can withdraw. And I'm like, I can't live, inflation, all that stuff, it's not going to be worth as much. So then I'm like, okay, how can I hit this $1 million mark in this financial independence mark a lot sooner? And I started looking for other things. And that's when I'm in one of these discords for stock trading, and someone's like, hey, if you're interested, and I'm actively looking for this, hey, if you're interested in just investing like another asset class, like, check out Bigger Pockets. And that is another point in time where my life changed. And I actually am in that Discord, and I help people in there now because of that. Because it just was phenomenal. Like, I listened to, my first episode was this guy named Todd Baldwin, who I was actually on his podcast too, which was cool. He was 28 or 25 or 26 at the time, making hundreds of thousands of dollars, buying houses, renting them by the bedroom. I mean, millionaire by like 25 years old. And I was like, wow, that sounds way better than just investing into the market. So I pivoted. I listened to every single podcast, like every single one. I started from episode 1 and went all the way up. I listened to all the rookie podcasts. I listened to some of their money podcasts, the business podcasts. I read a bunch of their books. And 6 months later, I mean, now I'm on this, or I guess 5 months later, 4 to 5 months later, now I'm like looking to like take action on everything I've learned and buy a house.
So by then, the market, by the latter part of 2020, I think the market was beginning to come back, and you were beginning to see that doubling of your investment in early 2020, right? So did you then cash out of that investment to put into real estate?
I did. I don't have any all the stuff I invested in 2020, I don't have anymore. I sold it all to, I mean, some of it I kind of repositioned, but most of it I sold to put into property.
So now you're in this new community, you found Bigger Pockets, you find some new guys that are challenging you, who have walked the walk, and it's more, you are drawn into real estate as against stocks. Is that still your conviction right now, that real estate investment trumps investing in stocks?
Absolutely, like, no doubt in my mind. For me to have the cash flow that I have right now, I would probably have to invest close to $700,000 or something like that. I can do the math. Yeah, it would be a lot of my own capital that I'd have to invest, and then that money would have to then compound for me to, it's even more than 700 grand. For me to just get that cash flow and be able to actually have some utility with it. And then on top of that, real estate has better tax advantages. I'm not waiting until age 60 to pay no taxes. I pay no taxes now on my real estate assets because real estate depreciates. The tenants are paying down my mortgage. So there, those I think I always see these Instagram or Twitter posts where, hey, if you put $200 a month or $300 a month from 20 to 65, you'll have like $1.2 million. Well, I own almost like $1 million worth of real estate right now. So 30 years from now, I'll be 50. And that real estate will be worth more than $1 million. Will probably be worth $2-3 million. And I can cash out, right? So that's my retirement savings right there, is my tenants paying down my mortgage. And I think, and then I just kind of alluded to appreciation, just like that. There's just not enough. They're not making more land. There's a supply and demand problem. Yes, real estate can go down in value, but over time it goes up, which benefits people with inflation, which benefits me greatly, and investors in general greatly. So that's my take on it.
Yeah. So now you found this new love affair with real estate. How did you go about getting your first deal? What were some of the things you had to walk through? Speak to someone who is convinced about real estate, just not, but doesn't know how to get started and getting that first deal?
Yeah, so I think it was a combination of a few things. So one, I mentioned I was super educating, right? I'm spending 4 to 5, maybe sometimes 8 hours of my day just learning about this new asset class. But then another part of it is I was actually meeting and hanging around people who were at least interested. I mean, I knew some real estate investors. I joined this group called Cheeks Freaks, which is basically a group of young people who are interested in being financially free, hence the word freaks, because it's not normal.
Okay.
And so I was in that group, and every week we'll talk about our wins for the week and our losses. And like, I blurted out one day, hey, I'm trying to buy my next property in the next 90 days. Hold me accountable. And now I have to do it, because if I don't, I look like an idiot. So I would be, and then I'm telling them my progress with that process. So I don't want to fail and look dumb in front of them. But it was tough. I mean, I was 19 years old at the time. I didn't even have 6 months of credit. I didn't have a credit score at all, because at the time I started the process of getting approved for a loan, I had no credit history. The military only paid me $18,000 a year. That was what was on my tax return. So that wasn't going for me. And I didn't have the 2 years of W-2. The only thing I had really going for me is I had a little bit of capital saved up from investing. So I called 13 different banks, calling them like I'm like trying to get an answer. I called 13 of them, and then, they all told me no. They were like, there's no way. I mean, I had one dude, I've been in this business for 20 years. I'm telling you right now, there's no way that it's not possible. You will not buy a property. You need to make more money. You need a credit score, and you're just going to have to wait. Like, it's just not happening.
Yeah.
But on that 13th bank I called, I got a maybe. And then I called 19 different banks in total. But then going back to that 13th bank, now I'm learning like the right things to say. I did more research to figure out what I actually needed. And my plan at the time, I was going to use someone else's credit, right? There's someone else who had the income, who had like all the requirements to just co-borrow on the loan with me. So that was the plan. So I called everyone in my family to help me out with this, and they all said no. Even though like I'm literally saying, hey, I have the capital to do this. I can even get you out this thing. It won't be on your credit after 6 months. Like, I have this plan. I know what I'm doing. I've done all this research. No. So
I mean, who would give a 19-year-old, their investments, right? Or their savings? I want this to be useful for someone who's getting started. Where did you find those phone numbers that you were calling, those 13 banks? Did you just Google local banks around you, and you just found their phone numbers, and you were calling their financing or real estate division?
Exactly. That's exactly what I did. I also was calling other investors and getting referrals from them on different banks. And I met those investors through Facebook groups. Every area has them. Whatever your local area is, for example, Savannah, Georgia, real estate investors, Atlanta, Georgia, real estate investors, Virginia, real estate investors, DMV, real estate investors. They're every probably bigger area or area where real estate's big everywhere. They usually have a Facebook group where you can like talk to people and meet people. And I'd message them, and I'm like, hey, I'm 19 years old. I'm trying to buy a house. If you have any loan, like people who, if you know any loan officers, please let me know. I'm looking to get financing. And, after every one of those, someone will shoot you a name and number for you to call.
Yeah.
So that's where I got all the phone numbers.
So it's really about the repetition, and it's really the law of numbers, right? That if you just message 50 people, maybe 3 of them will come good. Just doing it by the numbers and going through the process over and over again, and not not throwing up the towel at the first no and at the first rejection.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people, my mind was like, I never thought like I was crazy. I was like, well, I haven't called enough people. That was my mindset. Like, I haven't called enough people. That's why I'm not getting the answers that I'm looking for. So even when I was calling my family, I was like, okay, well, you've only tried your family. Try someone else's. So that's when I started calling my friends, right? My Marine friends, because they have income. Some of them have 2 years of W-2, maybe some of them get BAH. And so they're bankable. They're able to do this. And I called 3 of them and all 3 of them were down for it, which was the crazy part. So now I have the loan right now, or I have a plan to get the loan. And so I had the house. I got the house under contract because now I was able to get a pre-approval. I got the house under contract, and now we're in this process of like, hey, you have 10 days to do the inspection, everything like that. And then that's when I had to solidify my financing. And luckily for me, the loan officer who had told me maybe called me back, because I was actually about to lose the deal because I wasn't, like, they had said I was qualified and then they took it back from me. And so that's when he called me back and he was like, hey, if you put 5% down and use your VA loan, you can buy this property by yourself and you don't have to use anybody else. And the reason for that was, for my specific scenario, was my credit score, like my 6th credit payment had finally reported like that week, that same week. So I finally had a credit score and it was luckily 750, which is good. And that was just luck, right? My income, because I was putting 5% down, I was actually able to qualify because I had no debt for that, like a little bit less than what the house asking price was. So I was able to qualify for $233,000. And so I had to just put together the other like $13,000. And then the income history, like, not like, there's a rule in lending where you need 2 years of tax returns for them to prove your income. Well, because I'm military, I have a contract stating, hey, this guy's going to be employed for the next 5 years. So he was able to do that and use that to work in my favor. So I technically checked in all the boxes.
While you're on that, for those who are not in the military, if you've just graduated from school as well, and you're working in the field of your study, you can also get that same waiver. Because you've spent 4 years or you spent 2 years of graduate study, say studying finance, for example. And if you're working in finance, even though you don't have 2 years of W-2 or 2 years of tax return, the bank can still work around that because you are working in the field of your study.
Yeah, exactly. And that's actually what some of my friends in the Sheiks Freaks community are doing. When they graduate, they're going to be able to get approved for a loan because they're working in the same industry as their major. Essentially, I was able to buy the house and close on it when I was 19, like 5 months after like figuring out what real estate even was, which was amazing, right? And then now I'm facing even more adversity because then last minute, that same week I closed, the military calls and they let me know, hey, so we're going to send you to the middle of nowhere in the desert on the other side of the country. You're going to have limited connectivity. So you need to figure out your life between now and then because, needs of the Marine Corps comes first.
How many weeks did they give you to figure that out?
A week.
Wow.
Yeah. So at this point, right, I'm like, there's no way. Like, I went through all of this to buy this house. I did not buy this thing to pay my own mortgage. I bought it so other people can pay my mortgage.
Yeah.
So what I did,
you don't even have the money to pay your mortgage.
Right. Like it was like a no-fail option. It was like a no-fail option here. So